My name is Kayla. I'm 33, born and raised in Austin, Texas, in a house where silence was loud enough to carry the weight of expectations. The dinner table was a stage, and the script never changed. "So, what's your plan for the future?" they'd ask, as if life came with a checklist, a simple formula to follow, and anyone who strayed was nothing short of an anomaly. In my family, being a daughter meant being cast in a role long before you ever learned your lines. Go to college, preferably Vanderbilt or Rice. Graduate, find a job in an office with a nameplate, a dress code, and most importantly, a retirement plan. Get married by 30, have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and live within 20 minutes of your parents. That way they could drop by on weekends, offer unsolicited advice on your cooking, and of course, remind you how much you needed their guidance. For a long time, I thought I'd follow that script. I imagined my life playing out just like that. Then, I turned 22. It was my final year at the University of Texas studying finance, and I suddenly felt like I was suffocating inside a box, locked, trapped, and expected to conform. Every morning, I woke up with the same question in my mind, a question that refused to leave me. Is this really going to be my life? I had always been drawn to colors, shapes, light, the things my family dismissed as frivolous, artsy nonsense, unworthy of serious attention. One evening, sitting in my dorm room, it hit me. I couldn't go through life as a cog in a corporate machine. I couldn't ignore the pull of creativity any longer. I switched my major to interior design. It was the first shock I delivered to my family. My mother, Susan, sighed deeply. The sound still echoes in my memory. My father, Richard, didn't even look up from his newspaper. "You're giving up stability to draw chairs," he said, as though that simple sentence would somehow make me change my mind. I didn't argue. I packed my things, moved to a tiny studio apartment in Chicago, and started an unpaid internship at a boutique design firm. They called it Chasing a Fantasy. My mom sent me endless links. Top 10 stable careers for women, or why getting married before 30 will set you up for life. I tried to explain, tried to be gentle, but they didn't listen. It was the same every time. Arguments, silence, and more silence. The further I got from them physically, the closer I got to myself. Soon enough, I started landing clients of my own. I collaborated on projects in New York, then Boston, Seattle, even London. It wasn't always easy. Freelance work can be unstable, but it was mine. I learned how to work remotely, pitch ideas over Zoom, send drafts at midnight, and juggle deadlines across different time zones. But it never wore me down. In fact, for the first time in my life, I felt alive. Then came Thanksgiving. I was in Zurich, finishing a major contract with a boutique hotel chain. My mom sent a text that simply read, "If even family comes second to your job, who do you plan on putting first?" I read it in a cold kitchen, my cup of black tea in hand, a quiet smile tugging at my lips. I had spent my entire 20s trying to make them understand, trying to show them that I wasn't chasing a fantasy. I was building a life. But the truth was, not everyone is ready to see you become something they can't even imagine. I didn't get married at 25 like they wanted. I don't have kids or a house with a white picket fence. But I do have my own design studio, a team of talented collaborators and projects stretching from Los Angeles to Tokyo. And above all, I have a life that's mine, built by me, brick by brick, drawing by drawing. Yet to my parents, that wasn't enough. To them, if I didn't have a husband who was a doctor or an engineer, everything I had was nothing more than an illusion. Then came the wedding invitation, my cousin's wedding, and alongside it, a handwritten note from my mom. "Hope your imaginary boyfriend can make it this time." I read the card 3 times each time with a strange sense of quiet resignation. Not anger, not sadness, just a bitter recognition that they would never truly understand me. They didn't know that the man they called imaginary had just booked a flight from Singapore just to attend the party with me. And not only was he real, but he was about to make them see me in a way they never had before. I used to think if I were patient enough, if I showed them how happy and successful I was, they'd stop asking the same questions. Why aren't you married yet? Is your job even real? Is your boyfriend even real? I was wrong. When I told them I was engaged to Logan, an international aviation consultant who split his time between Singapore and Abu Dhabi, my mom's first response wasn't joy. It was a raised eyebrow, followed by a question that sliced through the moment. Do you have a photo? I opened. My phone scrolled to a picture of us hand in hand under the dazzling lights of Marina Bay in Singapore. She glanced at it and handed the phone back to me with a sigh, so dramatic I could almost hear it reverberating in the room. You know, Photoshop is really advanced these days, right? That cut deeper than any critique she had ever given. For the first time, my mother implied that I had fabricated a relationship, that I had edited a man into existence just to impress them. I froze. I had expected skepticism, but not this. She didn't stop there. She brought it up again at a family dinner. The laughter was sharp, as though they had been waiting for me to deliver the punchline. Kayla says she's engaged, but no one's seen him. No photos, no video calls, no presents. Maybe he's a model, pulled from an interior design magazine, a figment of her overactive imagination. I sat there, my fingers clutching my water glass so tightly, my hands trembling as if they could shatter at any moment. My heart hammered so loudly in my chest that I was certain everyone could hear it. Feel it, but I said nothing. Not because I didn't have the words. No, I knew what I could say, what I should say, but the reality was much simpler. Anything I said would be twisted into something far worse than it was. Why so sensitive? They'd ask. What are you so defensive about? Worse still, guilty conscience. There was nothing more suffocating than pity. Pity is worse than doubt. They didn't see me as a grown woman making her own choices. No, I was still the child they'd wanted to mold, the one who'd missed the life train, as my aunt had put it, a woman in her 30s, unmarried, living far from home. Of course, she must be lonely. Perhaps they mused in hushed whispers. She made him up to fill the void. The words were meant for my mother's ears, but they weren't soft enough to escape mine. She's just pretending, my aunt whispered, eyes casting a glance in my direction. I left that dinner with the weight of their words hanging in the air, unspoken but deafening. No one followed me. No one called after me. No apologies, just the hollow click of the front door behind me. The moment I slid into the car, Logan called his voice a balm I didn't realize I needed. Is everything okay? He asked, the concern in his voice cutting through the numbness. I paused, exhaled slowly, then chuckled softly. My family thinks you don't exist. He fell quiet for a moment. I could almost hear him thinking, processing what this meant for me, for us. Then, in that calm, deep voice of his, he said, Maybe I should show up properly. I have a work trip in New York next month. Want me to accidentally show up at your cousin's engagement party? This time, I laughed not to mask my feelings, but because something inside me stirred. You sure? I asked. They'll analyze every inch of you? I'm real. I'm flying real, and I really love you, Logan, replied, his words steady, unwavering. They, on the other hand, seem to need a reality check. I leaned back against the seat, watching the city lights blur past the car window. What I felt wasn't some form of petty revenge. No, it was relief. Real, undeniable relief. For the first time, someone was standing beside me, not behind me, not in front of me, but beside me. And this time, I wouldn't be enduring it alone. I wasn't walking into that room to prove anything, not to them, not to anyone. But this time, I would walk in with my head held high, not begging for trust, but putting an end to years of doubt, belittling, and being treated like a joke. They used to laugh, but at Madison's engagement party, no one would be laughing when Logan walked in, and I would be there beside him, standing proudly. Not to show them how wrong they were, but to show them I had never needed their belief to live my truth, but now they wouldn't be able to look away. The engagement party was set at a luxury resort on the edge of Lake Tahoe, exquisite in every detail, the kind of place where every corner whispered money. Silk runners lined the aisle. A jazz band played under the grand glass-roofed garden. It was all meticulously arranged. My entire family was there, dressed to the nines, eyes gleaming with pride, like I was a living trophy of their standards. They saw Madison, my cousin, as the ideal daughter, straight out of a storybook. I, on the other hand, arrived alone. Logan was still caught up in a meeting in San Francisco, but he'd assured me he would make it in time. I wasn't worried. I knew he would. As I stepped in, I could feel the weight of their eyes upon me, not because of my deep red dress or the elegant updo I'd painstakingly styled, but because I was alone. My Aunt Madison's mother approached me with a smile, deliberate and calculating. "Kayla, are you still single?" she asked, her voice laced with a sharp edge. "Or are we still waiting for the mystery boyfriend to fly in from Asia?" The laughter that rippled around the table felt like nails on a chalkboard, but I didn't respond. I simply nodded ever so slightly and walked straight past her to the reception area where Madison was posing for pictures with her fiancé, Kyle, the epitome of a stable, dependable son-in-law. He was a dentist, a textbook example of what my family valued. Madison hugged me tightly, her arms warm and genuine. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her eyes bright with sincerity. "I hope today won't be too exhausting for you." I smiled back, nodded, but I knew the real exhaustion was only just beginning. I hadn't planned to say anything at the party. I just wanted to congratulate my cousin and leave quietly. But then the host invited family members to share a few words. And that's when my mother, with a sweetness that dripped like honey, pushed me toward the stage. "Say something, Kayla," she urged, her voice soft, but her eyes sharp like the edge of a blade. "It'd be weird if the eldest sister didn't speak," she added almost too sweetly. I stepped up, my heartbeat steady, my mind clear. Everyone was watching, expecting something dramatic, a train wreck. I could feel it in their eyes, their judgment, their anticipation. I took the mic, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I spoke calmly. "It's beautiful to see you loved, trusted, and celebrated by everyone here." I began, my voice steady, unwavering. "Not all of us have had that, so if you do hold on to it, cherish it, because that's the most precious thing." Silence. Then a few scattered claps. I stepped down, but then the sound of rotor blades cut through the air. Distant at first, but growing louder, sharper. The tension in the room thickened. I didn't need to look outside. I knew who it was. Heads turned upward in unison. The sound of blades slicing through the air grew louder, and there, descending slowly onto the landing pad beyond the golden maple trees, was the helicopter. My aunt lowered her champagne glass with deliberate care, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. My mother's hand gripped the edge of the tablecloth, knuckles white as if she were trying to anchor herself to reality. My cousin's eyes widened in disbelief, her mouth falling open, and Madison of all people stared at me, her expression frozen in stunned silence. The helicopter's door swung open with a mechanical whoosh, and there he was, Logan. His charcoal suit, tailored to perfection, clung to his frame like it was made for him because it was. His brown hair was tousled from the wind, and in his hand, he carried a small, unassuming gift box. He walked across the lawn with the ease of someone used to attention, Yet his gaze was fixed on me. Searching for only one person, I could hear the faint hum of the engine as it powered down, but the air around us thickened as if time itself had paused. "Sorry I'm late," Logan said, his deep voice cutting through the stunned silence. A few quiet chuckles from the crowd, but mostly silence. He reached me, gently, took my hand, and whispered, "Did I make it in time?" I nodded, but I couldn't take my eyes off my mother. She was still frozen in her seat, clutching the silk cushion, her hands clenched so tightly they turned white. She didn't speak. No one did. The room held its breath. Logan turned to the MC with a polite smile, his voice steady. "I'm not giving a speech, but if anyone was still wondering if I'm real, I hope that's cleared up now." The room didn't erupt in laughter. No. It was something deeper. It was a collective intake of breath, eyes wide with surprise, murmurs swelling through the air like a shift in the tectonic plates. There was a feeling one I couldn't name at first, but it was something akin to collapse. Not mine, theirs. The ones who doubted, who whispered, who laughed at me. In that moment, I didn't need to win. I didn't need to prove anything. I had already reclaimed my worth in front of the people who once made me question it the most. Logan didn't need to say much. His presence alone was enough. It was like someone had hit the pause button on the room. Every assumption suspended in air, hanging for one fragile moment before it shattered. He walked confidently, purposefully greeting everyone with the same unshaken composure, starting with Aunt Martha, who had spent years judging people by the sparkle of their watches and the brands on their shoes. "Lovely to meet you, Logan," said his voice warm but never condescending. "Madison told me you used to design wedding dresses. I've just partnered with a fashion brand in Milan. Perhaps we should talk?" Aunt Martha nodded vigorously, her face flushing with color. For the first time, she had nothing to criticize, nothing to compare him to. It was almost amusing the way she had to recalibrate her judgment. Logan wasn't just impressive because of the helicopter, or his looks, or even the effortless charisma that came with him. It was how he spoke, always confident, never arrogant, never forced. He shook hands with Uncle Ron, who had once casually said that I had probably made up my boyfriend just to show off. Logan turned to him with a calm expression. "Kayla mentioned you launched the first successful shipping company in this region. I admire entrepreneurs who start early." Uncle Ron didn't just laugh. He actually patted Logan on the back, his stern face softening for the first time. "Looks like Kayla's finally got a good eye," he said with a nod that meant more than just a compliment. My mother had moved to the far corner of the room, her hand still resting on her wine glass, her eyes darting from Logan to me, clearly struggling to keep up with what was happening. But Logan didn't shy away. He walked straight to her, offered a firm yet respectful handshake. "Ms. Linda, it's a pleasure. Kayla's told me so much about you." My mother gave a slight nod, her eyes flicking to me before she replied, her voice quieter than before. "I've heard a lot about you too. Things are clearer now." I couldn't tell if it was an acknowledgement or a surrender, but for my mother, saying nothing negative was already a form of progress, a small victory in its own right. A few minutes later, my father, Jeff, approached. He was a quiet man, serious, always evaluating like a contractor inspecting a foundation. Logan spoke first, with the same measured tone I understand you developed nearly the entire west end of the city. "That's visionary work, sir." Jeff nodded, shaking Logan's hand, his expression unreadable. But I saw it, the smallest twitch at the corner of his mouth, a micro-expression that spoke volumes. It was the same look he gave whenever he accepted something without admitting that he had ever been wrong. And then came Sean, my younger brother. He was standing near the cake table, pretending to taste frosting. But his eyes hadn't left Logan since the moment he stepped out of the helicopter. Sean had been the most vocal when I first talked about my long-distance relationship, mocking me relentlessly. I started to walk past him when he called out softly, "Kay." I turned to face him. He scratched his head awkwardly. He doesn't look like I thought." I crossed my arms. "What do you mean?" Sean hesitated, his eyes darting between Logan and me, like I couldn't picture someone like him actually showing up here. "I mean, he's good. Really good." I didn't respond immediately. My eyes probably said enough. Sean lowered his gaze, then mumbled, "If I ever said anything out of line, I was just worried you'd get hurt." It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest I'd ever gotten from Sean, and for now, that was enough. The tone of the party had shifted. The people who had once whispered behind my back, who had doubted me and dismissed me, were now crowding around Logan, asking about his work, his travels, his life in the Middle East. They no longer looked at me with pity. No, they were looking at me differently now, and this time, it wasn't because I was trying to prove anything. It was because they finally understood I wasn't a joke, and I never had been. Instead, there was something new, curiosity, and for the first time in years, the faintest trace of respect. Madison walked over, cocktail in hand, her eyes gleaming with something I hadn't seen before. "He's real," she said, her voice low, almost in awe. "And even better than I imagined, you didn't have to do anything. He changed the whole room with one handshake." I smiled softly. It wasn't about changing them. I knew that. It wasn't about forcing their approval. All I ever wanted was for them to stop laughing. Madison nodded. "They're not laughing anymore. They're looking up to you." I glanced around, and she was right. The room had shifted. I was no longer the whimsical daughter. I wasn't the last one, the unmarried one. I was the woman who had built a career, a love, and a life, my life, and for the first time, everyone had to acknowledge it. After Madison's engagement party, I didn't expect any calls or messages from my family. The silence was familiar, a constant that followed our encounters. But this time, something was different. Less than a week later, in the family group chat, usually a digital space for food, updates, photos, and church events, I saw something that made me pause. A photo of Logan and me by the wedding cake posted by my mother. The caption read, "Turns out, Kayla didn't choose too badly, after all." Below the photo, Aunt Haha had commented, "Tall and charming too," while Uncle Greg dropped a clapping emoji. No one mentioned the imaginary boyfriend. No one questioned if the photo was real or edited. I stared at it, absorbing the shift in their tone. It was subtle, but it was there. That same day, my dad, who rarely showed interest in social media and certainly never acknowledged my work in design, sent me a private link to an Architectural Digest article. The title read, "The Women Redesigning America's Boutique Hotels," and there nestled in the lines of the piece was my name, Kayla Morgan. He wrote only one line. "Nice article. Your section on contrast design was convincing." I read the message at least 3 times. Not because it was emotional, though. I felt the stirrings of something deep within. But because it was the first time my father had ever acknowledged my work without dismissing it as a phase or a risky venture. Those changes didn't come with a bang. They arrived softly, like a passing breeze, but they left something real in their wake. A week later, my mom called. She didn't start with a greeting. There was no, "Hi, how are you?" or "How's the city?" Instead, she simply asked, "Are you busy? I wanted to ask you something." I pulled out my earbuds and sat on the balcony of my apartment, staring out at the high rises of Chicago. "I'm listening." She paused for a moment, then asked, almost hesitantly, "I wanted to ask about Aunt Sandy's living room. Do you think gray or beige would go better with the lighting?" I nearly laughed. "You're calling me about interior design?" I asked, half skeptical, half amused. "You saw the photos I posted on Instagram." "Well, I saw the photos," she replied, her voice unsure. They looked professional. I paused, taking in the unexpected compliment, and then said, "Gray, if the room has west-facing windows?" She nodded, as though actually taking notes, and then for some reason her voice softened. "I know I've been hard on you. Maybe I was wrong to think there's only one path to success." I didn't respond, because I knew if I did, my voice might betray me. I might not be able to keep it steady. Then she added slowly, "Logan? He seems serious and thoughtful." I couldn't help but smile. "Yeah, I think so too." She didn't ask anything further, but before hanging up, she added, "If you need help, don't hesitate to ask. I'm not great with your modern design stuff, but I do know how to pick wedding flowers." As the screen dimmed after the call, I felt something subtle inside me shift. Not because my mother had fully changed, but because for the first time she opened a door. Even if just slightly, she had taken a step toward me instead of waiting for me to come back to her. That evening, Logan returned from a short flight to Toronto. He set his bag down, walked straight into the kitchen, and paused, studying me for a moment. "You look different." Something happened. I told him everything. The family group photo, the article, the call with my mom. I left out the part about the wedding flowers, not because it didn't matter, but because I knew that was a small moment, one that meant more to me than anyone else would understand. Logan didn't say much. He just poured me a glass of white wine, sat beside me, and waited. "They're moving," he said softly, as if his words were meant for me and no one else. I nodded slowly. "But it's real, like a plane getting ready for takeoff." He smiled, his gaze warm but knowing. "It starts slow, but then it reaches a speed where it just lifts off." I leaned my head on his shoulder, the steady rhythm of his breathing grounding me. I knew my family would never be perfect. There would still be moments of doubt from my mom. My dad would always hesitate, caught between acceptance and skepticism. But I had learned something important in that silence, in that quiet space they had given me. I didn't need their flawless approval to live my truth. I didn't need them to understand me. I just needed them to see me. For the first time, I felt like they were starting to. 3 months after that conversation with my mom, I received an invitation to speak at the Global Business Leadership Summit in Dubai, a gathering of founders, investors, and innovators reshaping their industries. Logan had already been invited to speak on a panel about the future of urban aviation. But my invitation was different. I was asked to share how I built a cross-continental luxury design brand without a single venture capital dollar. I read the invitation email while sitting in my favorite cafe near the studio in Chicago. The warm light from the windows catching the edges of my cup, and I knew instantly what I had to do next. I picked up a pen, the ink flowing slowly across the paper as I hand-wrote on 2 of the thick, formal invitations printed by the organizers. Once you asked if I was serious about my life, this is the answer. I signed them, sealed the ivory envelopes with a wax stamp bearing my name, and mailed them. No email, no heads up, no explanation. 4 days later, my mom called. "Mall talk. What should we wear?" I smiled. "Evening business attire, but nothing over the top. Dubai will take care of the rest." My parents arrived on a golden afternoon, the sun low and casting a warm glow across the city. Logan picked them up in an electric car at Alam Tomb International. Not to impress, we had already done the helicopter thing. This time it was different. I just wanted everything to be in rhythm, just enough for them to see and not be able to unsee. Our apartment was on the 48th floor of a sleek glass tower with sweeping views of the palm-shaped man-made island. White and olive tones filled the space. Italian stone floors gleaming underfoot. The floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto a wide balcony that looked out onto the Persian Gulf. On the coffee table sat the blueprint I was working on for a boutique hotel in Morocco. My mom stepped inside silently. She touched the walnut, Scandinavian-style table. Gently, her fingers lingering for a moment. She paused in front of an abstract painting, one I had created and exhibited in Tokyo. "This place?" She started, then stopped herself. My dad stood by the window, staring out at the sea. After a long pause, he spoke, without turning around. "I never imagined you living like this." I didn't answer. I just poured them mint tea, which Logan had brewed himself, and then gave them a quiet tour of the building. The hanging gardens, the infinity pool, the yoga studio overlooking the desert. Each room, each moment was designed to show them, but not overwhelm them. That night, I walked onto the main stage of the summit dressed in a custom cream suit, my hair pulled into a simple low bun with only small pearl earrings for adornment. Logan sat in the front row beside my parents. The spotlight cast a soft haze over the room of nearly 300 people, like the quiet atmosphere of a theater before the performance begins. I didn't begin with a list of achievements or accolades. I didn't recite my awards or the companies that had supported me. Instead, I spoke about being underestimated, about what it felt like to sit in a room full of family and still feel invisible, about the loneliness of being the one who had chosen wrong. I talked about those days when I lived only on passion and belief in myself. Because no one else did, I spoke about learning to build my own seat when no one would offer me one. The room was still completely silent. I glanced down at the front row. My mom adjusted her collar, trying to hide the tightness in her throat. My dad's hands were clasped in his lap, his eyes focused on me, never leaving me for a second. After the talk, I stepped down into a stream of people. Hands reached out, cards exchanged, collaborations proposed. A Swiss executive wanted me to design their new European hotel chain. A Dubai publisher wanted to write a book about my journey. I barely noticed the bustle around me, my mind still processing what had just happened. My dad stood beside me, shaking hands with some of the guests, nodding the way he did when he thought something was important. My mom, though, she only said one thing to Logan as we sat down for dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the glowing city. "Thank you for believing in her when we didn't know what to believe in." She said, her voice quiet, but full of something I hadn't heard before. Logan smiled, his eyes steady. "You don't need to thank me. Kayla did it all on her own. I just stood beside her. I didn't expect redemption or apologies. But the way my mother looked at me, then her eyes filled with unmistakable pride, was all I needed. It wasn't about proving who was right or wrong. It was about reclaiming something far greater, my freedom. The freedom to live, to choose to be seen as who I always believed I was." As I stepped off the stage that night, the spotlight still glowing behind me, the applause already fading, something inside me lingered, something deep and full of quiet strength. It wasn't just the success. It was the journey that had brought me here, the years I'd spent fighting to keep from being swallowed by doubt. I didn't search for my parents' eyes as I left the stage, but I felt them. I felt them like standing in the rain. You don't need to look up to know the drops are falling. Logan was the first to hug me, his arms wrapped around me, his warmth spreading through me like a quiet reassurance. He whispered in my ear, "You just made the whole room go silent." And for the first time in my life, I finally understood what that silence meant. "You just made me fall in love with you all over again." We returned to the front row where my parents were still seated. My mom dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Her movements slow and deliberate. She avoided my gaze, but for the first time in years, it wasn't to hide discomfort. It was to hold back something more raw, emotion. My dad didn't cry. I don't think he knows how. But when the talk ended, he was the first to stand and the last to stop clapping after everyone else had settled into their seats. The slowness of his applause meant more to me than any compliment I'd ever received. After dinner, as the crowd began to thin, he approached me. His hands were stuffed into his dress pants pockets, his face calm but familiar. "You know," he began, his voice low and just a bit shaky, "I used to think art was just a hobby, that you were chasing something vague." I didn't say anything. I simply waited. I knew this moment had to unfold in its own time. "Tonight," he continued, "I saw the people listening to you. I saw how they looked at you. And I realized you're not just creating beauty, you're creating value for yourself, for others, for this world." He paused, and when he spoke again, it was slower, clearer. "I'm proud of you, Kayla." I had never heard those words from him, not when I got into college, not when I opened my first studio, not even when I made the magazine cover. But this time, in a country halfway across the world in front of hundreds of strangers, I finally heard them. I nodded a soft gesture of gratitude, and strangely, I didn't cry. Maybe because I had grown enough to understand. Not everyone knows how to love you the right way from the start. But when they finally do, when they finally learn their recognition isn't just a reward, it's a milestone, the end of a long, lonely road. My mom came over afterward, quiet at first, before gently smoothing the shoulder of my jacket. It was just like when I was younger, and she'd do the same before school competitions. "As a kid, you spoke beautifully," she said, her voice softening. "Honestly, I think I was so afraid of you failing that I didn't realize you had already succeeded." In your own way, I rested my hand lightly on her shoulder, feeling the warmth of her presence. "I understand. And I've never blamed you for worrying. I just wish you'd believed in me sooner. I wish that too." She whispered, her voice low. "But I'm here now. Today, I'm telling you, I won't doubt you again." We didn't need to hug tightly. We just stood there, side by side, looking out from the hotel balcony. Below, the lights of Dubai flickered like stars sewn onto velvet. That night, back at the apartment, Logan and I opened a bottle of chilled white wine. He poured 2 glasses, but only took a sip before setting his down. "You didn't just make them see you," he said, softly, looking at me with admiration. "You made them believe in you." I rested my head on his shoulder, the weight of the day settling over me. I didn't feel the need to prove anything anymore. No more anger, no more regret. Because for the first time, I knew I had been heard. Not by a conference room, not by the media, but by the very people who once believed I couldn't do it. The Dubai trip ended with a late breakfast on the hotel rooftop. The soft sunlight falling over the pastry tray and steaming espresso cups. My mom asked Logan about his upcoming project in Istanbul. My dad sat reading a financial article, nodding occasionally, as I spoke about my next meeting in Milan. Everything felt strangely natural, as if we had always shared this rhythm, like the years of tension and distance had never existed. But I knew to have this peaceful morning, I had walked a very long road to get here. I simply said, "Thank you for coming. No reminders, no quiet, hope that they would change completely." I didn't need that anymore. On the way back to the apartment, Logan held my hand. We stayed quiet for a moment, walking side by side before he said, "You know, I've never seen you this strong." I smiled, the truth of it sinking in. "It's not because I'm trying to prove anything anymore. It's because I've finally let go." "Letting go?" Logan asked, turning to face me. "Letting go," I repeated, not of the dream, but of the expectation of being accepted, and that more than anything, made me free. I didn't need them to understand every decision I made, every move I packed for every late meeting across time zones. I didn't need them to love Logan or admire my work. I didn't need them to call me an amazing daughter. The only thing I needed was to invite them to the front row and let them see who I had become. Not to get even, but so that I'd never have to bow my head again. Back in Chicago, the email arrived from the summit organizers. They wanted to feature my speech as the opening keynote for next year's program. I reread the excerpt they had selected, and the words seemed to carry a weight I hadn't fully understood when I first spoke them. Some people grow up with support. Some fight through doubt. But whoever you are, if you believe in your path, don't wait for a green light. Keep walking. Let them figure out how to catch up. I sat in my studio, sunlight spilling through the large windows. A design draft for a seaside resort in Greece was open on my screen. My phone buzzed, the name of a client from Singapore flashing on the screen. I had back-to-back meetings next month, Florence, Tokyo, then back to New York. But I didn't feel the exhaustion creeping in. In fact, I felt lighter than I had in years. I hadn't won through arguments, not by convincing anyone in a boardroom or persuading them on the phone. I hadn't spent my time explaining myself or fighting for validation. I had won by staying true to who I was, by doing it long enough that no one could deny it. Someone once said that success is the gift you give yourself. But for me, it was also an unspoken message. A message that resonated deeper than any accomplishment or recognition. You were never wrong for choosing yourself. I still keep that invitation, cream-colored, paper, black ink, my name in slanted handwriting tucked in the drawer beside my bed. Every time I open it by chance, I smile, not because I remember the doubtful voices or the disappointed glances or those cold family dinners, but because I remember the moment they sat there in that lit-up hall with nothing left to say except to applaud. And I stood there with nothing left to wait for but the peace within myself. Kayla's story is proof that you don't need anyone's approval to become the best version of yourself. She chose her own path, stayed true to her passion, and kept going despite doubt and dismissal. Her success didn't come from pleasing her family. It came from living honestly, standing by her beliefs and never giving up. Sometimes the sweetest form of revenge is letting those who once doubted you sit front row and watch you shine. What do you think of Kayla's journey and how she reclaimed her worth? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and inspiring stories about family and life.